nobody on their deathbed ever says, gosh, I wish I'd have made more money. The main thing is to put everything in perspective and to try to be as compassionate and empathetic with others as you can, and to take each day at a time and really, really try to appreciate each day. And I know it's cliche. If this were the last day on earth, what would I be doing today? And knowing that you really, really can become a better person. I'm a lot better person. My wife will tell you that I'm more patient and I'm less worried about all the nitty-gritty stuff, and I don't get upset or uptight about near as many things as I used to. You know, a lot of good came out of my cancer. I became a better person, for sure.
Hi, listeners. This is the final episode of Season 2 of The Cancering Show, and wow, did we end on a good one. Today, we talk with Glen Mutchnick, a teacher, a cancer survivor since 2012, and the author of a book called Everybody's Got Tzuris. His book beautifully tells the tale of his and other cancer journeys and how these experiences taught Glen about himself and the importance of making every moment count. I know you're going to love this episode. Cancer is just something that we all have to recognize, acknowledge, cope with, live with, struggle with, rage upon, crush, and even thrive with. This show is more than knowing and fighting or beating cancer. It's more than just relaying science, hope, and technology. Together, our purpose is to demystify cancer, take away as much fear out of the diagnosis, treatment, and process as we can, defeat its grip on our lives. This is The Cancering Show. Glen, welcome to The Cancering Show.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
So we have talked to a lot of people telling cancer stories, and that includes the folks on the Voices of Cancer from the caretaker side, and of course, several patients. Glen, you are one of the few patients that we've had come in who is really far out from your diagnosis. Take us briefly through your cancer story.
Well, I was diagnosed in July of 2012, so that's 9 years since diagnosis, and so I am far out. And then it was a couple of years after that when I was done with most everything. So there was a mass on my thymus gland, and Bryce Whetstone, my general physician, found it and said we need to do something, and he hooked me up with a good surgeon, Larkin Daniels, and he said, well, we need to take it out. We don't know what it is. And they thought it was just going to be like a thymectomy or something like that. So unlike a lot of cases where they find the cancer, then they do the surgery and then decide what to do, they did the surgery, and then after the pathology report and all that, they determined then that it was large cell B-cell lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's.
That had to have been a shock. I, unfortunately, am in the position of giving that news post-op to patients from time to time. Tell me what that's like on the other side.
Well, it was from a surgeon, and he's a great guy, but he's a surgeon, and they're very methodical and very precise and to the point. And so actually, he was talking very fast, and he said, looks like you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. What oncologist you want to go to? And I'm like, I don't know any oncologists. Well, let me list them for you. There's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, I don't know, man. And so I wrote down everything I could do, and there's a photo of it in the book where I wrote everything he said. And it didn't really hit me. It did hit my wife. So when I called her, I was just kind of in shock and also kind of in denial. Yeah. And so she's the one that kind of took the hit, because when I found out later when she hung up for me and she cried and tried to figure out what to do. And in fact, through a lot of the process, she said I was in denial. I think it was more just, it was my defense mechanism to look positively at everything. But she was probably right too, that I was kind of in denial.
And it's probably both, right? The denial is our defense mechanism.
That's true. That's true.
So then you come through your cancer journey, and at the end of that, you really wanted to share that story. Do you think this comes from being a teacher and wanting to take people on that journey with you?
Absolutely. And really, I started kind of keeping a photo journal and notes, not knowing I'd write a book, but just I felt the need to take pictures of every nurse I came in contact with, every doctor, my feet walking into my first chemo. I don't know, I just started doing that and taking notes. And then later, I was writing the book and didn't know it at the time. But teaching my kids about this was very, very important to me. And when I was going through treatment, the doc said that I should take off because my immune system was compromised, especially from lymphoma. And I said, no, I want to keep working. And I was teaching at Clark Middle School at the time. And I said, I really want to keep working. And he said, okay. So I would have chemo on Thursday, be off on Friday, and back at work on Monday. And I did that through 9 months. But I was glad because the kids kept me alive and were my bright spot. And I wanted to be, it's kind of the teacher in me. I wanted to be their example of how this works, because a lot of the kids would have family that had cancer. By my informal polling of my students through the years, just about everybody is affected by cancer. Know somebody, has a friend, a relative, they've been through it. And so I would ask my kids, I'd say, how many of you have a family member or a close friend that's gone through this? And half the class will raise their hand, and I'll say, well, how many of you kind of afraid to ask them questions and want to know things but kind of don't know, and it's kind of the grown-ups are keeping things from you? And half the class would raise their hand. I said, well, ask me anything. And so from that day forward, they would ask me, why did you lose your hair? Because a lot of these kids thought that was from the cancer. And why did you do this? And how does it feel? And I said, ask me anything. And it was great. But my boys, about halfway through the year, the Eagles is the mascot, and they formed the Bald Eagle Club, and they all shaved their heads. And these were boys, 13-year-old boys who that hair was very important to them.
Yeah, that's really special.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And they set up a Facebook page with the Bald Eagle Club, and they all shaved their heads. And it was wonderful for me. And I used it as a teaching moment. I still do.
Well, all of that has resulted in all of us getting access to your book, Everybody's Got Tzuris. And I can't say
that
it.
was good. Perfect.
Tell us what that word means.
Well, it's a Yiddish word and I debated whether to use it in the title because it wouldn't be as commercially popular, but I didn't write it to be commercially popular at all. I wrote it to be part of my legacy, and it was on my bucket list. Dad, fly a plane, jump out of a plane, do all kinds of things. And I did it, learn how to play guitar. And so I did it. And it was for people who, my close circles. And if other people bought it, great, but I didn't do it for that reason. Yeah. And Tzuris is a Yiddish word which means difficulties, pain, troubles. And it can range for some people when they say, oh, I have Tzuris every day. And, that could mean minor things and bothers and troubles, or it could mean big things like having cancer.
I love that it's such a crossover, that it's such a Southern thing to call cancer your troubles.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, being Jewish in the South is a very interesting thing. A lot of New York Jewish people don't get Jewish people in the South. First of all, they don't think that there are any Jews in the South. You're from Alabama? Yes. Born and raised here. My parents were born and raised here. What? And you're Jewish? Yes.
Well, one of the oldest synagogues in the country is in Charleston, South Carolina.
Right. And the congregation, Spring Hill Avenue Temple in Mobile, is the oldest congregation in Alabama and one of the oldest in the country as well, like 1840. But so the Southern Jewish experience, which could be another book, is a very interesting thing. So we say all the Jewish things, oh, he's got Tzuris, I'm so sorry, pass the turnip greens,
Yes.
I'll have grits this morning. And so it's a good, interesting combination of those things. And so that word is used for a lot of different reasons, but that's why I chose that. And the fact that it's Everybody's Got Tzuris, you would think that'd be a given, that, well, yeah, everybody's got, but usually people are so wrapped up in their own problems and in their own world, and maybe their friends or maybe their relatives, that they really don't stop and think, wait a minute, every person has problems and difficulties. Yeah. And they could be major, they could be minor, they could be major compared to yours or minor compared to yours, but it's purely subjective. And some people believe theirs are more,
right?
Yes. Are worse than yours, even if you think they may not. In fact, the original title of the book, I don't know if I should say this, but was to be tongue-in-cheek was Everybody's Got Tzuris, but mine's worse than yours. That was the original title.
I love it.
But the publishers and editors said, people, I wouldn't do that. And so I kind of got away from
David Sedaris would love that title, actually.
Yeah, that would be good. But yeah, that's awesome. But and it kind of went from being more like, why does everybody think theirs is worse than everybody else, and why does from that to more what it evolved into.
I want to take a minute to talk about that because I am a teacher also of medical students and residents and now fellows in oncology. And we spend a lot of time talking about that because of, interactions between patients or with patients or nurses or other doctors or whatever. And just having that moment of compassion when somebody comes at you, anger blazing about anything.
Right.
To just remember what that person is going through, that you may have no idea what that person is going through, that a lot of their reaction to you is more about what their experience is, whether or not, there's something going on at home, etc., and how to always be the person de-escalating those situations than escalating.
That's exactly, and that was one of the points of the book too, to kind of teach that. And also that's what I taught my students, that a lot of good came out of my cancer. I became a better person, for sure. I stopped sweating the small stuff. Every day is important, and I don't, when the sun comes up and I'm awake, I'm like, got another one.
Yeah.
And it really does do that, and it makes you appreciate other people, what they're going through, because you don't know. And being a teacher in a rural school, a lot of my kids out there are coming from really, really tough situations. I had a student who lived in a trailer, no power, no water. And I'm like, well, what do you do to take a shower? Go to the bathroom. Oh, I walk down the road to my aunt's trailer. What? So my mission then was to get her a scholarship, get her out of there, get her into a school, which I did, and now she's a medical professional. And so when these kids come to school, they all look the same because they have uniforms on, but they have all kinds of stuff going on in their lives. And they're still smiling, and they still make me smile. So it's amazing. That's very, inspiring.
Well, your story is inspiring also, your ability to keep going in the face of your troubles. How does your cancering journey become this thing that makes you better? I feel like we try and describe that to people, and a lot of patients with a new cancer diagnosis will call BS on that. Like, this is not going to make me better.
Well, because they're scared, and there's a lot of fear involved with cancer. And the first thing people do is get on Google and start Googling their type of cancer, and that's the worst thing to do because it's going to say all kinds of stuff. And it's going to give you percentages and how if you might live, this percent lives past 5 years, this percent, and I've heard all of that. Mm-hmm. And so they're scared, and I can understand that. Being kind of in denial and switching to kind of a positive thing when I went through it, and I don't know if it was normal, psychologically healthy for me to do it, but what it was it made me not call BS on that. I knew that it was being good.
Yeah.
And I'd love to say, because I had an unusual insight into the fact that I would come out the other side in good shape and better person, but I don't think it was that. I think it was my mechanism for coping was to look positively and to teach kids and to work towards the goal of being a better person. But, I think that was just accidental.
I hate to say this, and maybe this is very either Presbyterian or Jewish of me.
Okay, good. Either one's great.
To say that, is it possible that both are a self-fulfilling prophecy? That if you truly believe that you will come out worse for it, don't worry, you will. And if you truly believe you'll come out better for it, then you will.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's easy to say that now that I've come out the other side.
Yeah.
Because the book has a lot of stories of people who didn't come out the other side.
Yeah.
And their story. It's a compilation of different stories in there. And so it's easy to say that now, but as a physician, attitude and hanging on to hope is very, very important in the physical wellness of a patient. And a lot of patients don't buy that, but I really believe that.
I
So
believe
that is true with the self-fulfilling prophecy. But
and I will say that is true in a lot of cultures and deeply embedded in a lot of cultures around the world, to not take away a patient's hope. And it can be hard at very end of life decisions to work within that model, to not tell a patient that they are dying, or not tell them that this is the last type of treatment we have available.
yeah, that's a tough call.
And I spend a lot of time saying that, there's still a lot of room to be hopeful
Right.
that there are more days ahead,
Right.
that there can be that we can successfully treat suffering, that
Right.
we can have days without pain or days without nausea, that there's still time.
And every day is precious.
Yes.
So, yes, attitude does help, and it got me. I don't know what percentage of my recovery was because of that, but it certainly got me through with that attitude. And I'm very idealistic, sometimes to a fault. And I was in a meeting one time, this board meeting, and one of these financial big shot guys insulted me by saying, "You're just being utopic." And I was like, "Thanks, that's okay." And he meant it as an insult.
Yeah, right.
But that's kind of what I've been accused of being. So maybe that helped me, and it can help others. But I also had a lot of survival guilt when it was all done, because a lot of people that I met at MCI and a lot of people that I knew around me didn't make it. And now, of course, then it was like, why did I not make it? They were just as good or better people than me, which made me drove me more, because it's like, well, maybe I need to do something.
Yeah. You mentioned in the book stories of people that you met who didn't survive. What's one that stands out to you?
Well, there's a chapter that Jeanette Cora wrote for me, and when I was writing the book, she said, her husband was going through cancer treatment, and it was early days of the book, like 3 years in, which the book took 6 years. And I said, well, write a chapter.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, could I? And I said, sure, it'll be published in a year or so. Well, so that was 4 years ago. So she wrote a chapter telling her husband's story and about her life changing with young kids and how precious each day was, and that the doctors had told her it could be 20 years or 20 weeks.
Wow.
Kind of what you're saying, that
Yeah.
they said, we're not going to peg this. And so her process, and she ironically volunteered for me when I was going through treatment at school as a parent volunteer, because I taught her kids. On the days I was off for chemo, she would cover the class and just take the kids out and do things for me. I mean, she did that for me, and then she got this news about her husband, which was ironic, sadly. And so she wrote that chapter, and then about a year after that, her husband died. And so I wrote the next chapter in the book describes that part and what we learned from that. That was a biggie.
Yeah. And what do you feel like you learned from that? You, the survivor, not the caretaker.
It helped me understand that of how tough the caretakers have it and what she went through, and how she tried very, very hard to appreciate life and go to the beach more, and when a lot of people would have been negative when their husband was dying. And she was determined not to do that. And I have a whole new respect for caregivers, which that's another part in the book too, that I always tell people, my wife, and we've been married 40 years, I said, she had it worse than me. Of course, she's like, no.
Right.
And I said, no, I'm not just saying that to be like nice guy. I did what the doctor said, sit in the chair, get the thing, get the x-ray,
Right.
get stuck in the thing. And I just did what they said and did it. Whereas you'd go home and have to deal with all the baggage of it.
You're not the first person to say that.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
it. I think it's absolutely true. And she disagrees with me. I said, no, I'm telling you, I would have much rather been the patient than the caregiver.
Than the
I couldn't
caregiver.
have gone through that with what you did. And that's what Jeanette Cora was, too.
There's that component, as you said, of survivor's guilt. How do you talk to other patients and other survivors about that?
I tell them, take one day at a time. Don't read what's on the internet. And it's very hard for a cancer patient to take it one day at a time. When do I do the chemo? And am I going to have chemo? Am I going to have to surgery? And I said, you don't know, and each person is completely different.
Yeah.
You may have to have any of these things done, but try not to predict or already go ahead and accept these things when a lot of them, most of them, may not even happen. And so take one step at a time. I'm going to deal with today. What am I doing? How am I feeling? What I got to get off the list today? I'm going to go have chemo today. Good. And then tomorrow I'm going to deal with tomorrow. And to try to appreciate every single day and everything in your life. People that I've observed when writing the book are so wrapped up with stupid things in their life, just the minor, petty, what went on in the line in the grocery store and who cut them off in the car and why this was late in the mail and that was it. And I'm thinking, if you were blessed to be able to know when your last day on this earth, you're going to sit there and you're not going to care one bit about all these things.
Right.
My students always ask me, they say, well, because I'm an engineer and worked as a mechanical engineer for 15 years before I became a teacher.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
My chemistry teacher, my AP chemistry teacher, left teaching to essentially become an engineer.
Well, yeah, he did it better probably because, I could be making 3-4 times what I make now. And my students think I'm great. Why would you do that? Because they're thinking money. And, and I said, well, nobody on their deathbed ever says, gosh, I wish I'd have made more money.
Yeah.
Or, that nobody does that. And yet, here I am with you guys. And if I was an engineer, I wouldn't have any of this. And I mean it. And kids can know if you're the genuine article or if you're full of baloney. And they know when I'm telling them the truth.
That's awesome. So what's your answer to the tough questions?
Which are?
What lessons can be learned from dealing with the Tzuris?
Well said. The main thing is to put everything in perspective and to try to be as compassionate and empathetic with others as you can. And you'll feel better. And to take each day at a time and really, really try to appreciate each day. And if you were to say yourself, and I know it's cliche, if this were the last day on earth, what would I be doing today? And knowing that you really, really can become a better person. I'm a lot better person. My wife will tell you that I'm more patient and I'm less worried about all the nitty-gritty stuff. And I don't get upset or uptight about as many things as I used to. And also, it's not going to be the big things necessarily that you're going to remember and that you're going to think are the most important. We're going to go to Disney World, and this is going to be we're going to make a memory for you, and this is going to be something you'll remember forever and appreciate life. It's not going to be those. It's going to be some conversation you had or some little thing that happened, and that might be the day that it's happening is today.
Ugh, that's incredibly powerful. And, a lot of living went into getting those lessons. I hope our listeners can take a moment to either put their cancer journey or their family member's cancer journey in perspective or just realize what it takes to get that kind of learning. Thank you again, Glen, for coming into the studio. We've really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And if I can say, MCI is lucky to have you. Just by talking with you, I can tell you're an empathetic, kind doctor. And that, to me, is as important as your academics credentials, which I know you have those, but to be personable. And that makes a giant difference to the patient, is a connection. And I did that at MCI. The nurses, the chemo nurses, were unbelievable. No nonsense. You're not going to whine in here, and you're not going to play the cancer card, whatever. And that was a relief. I was like, whew, okay. And the day that I rang the bell, it was weird. I was scared because it's like a prisoner that says, okay, you're out of jail, you're free now. Right. And because I was like,
now what?
That was my security place, which is weird. I wasn't overjoyed when I rang the bell. I was nervous that, I don't come back?
Right.
I was scared.
We did a whole episode on that. Why is it that the fear happens after you finish chemo,
Yeah,
not during?
absolutely true. Because you're doing things and you're active and you're involved. And I missed them. I actually would come back and visit the nurses. I'm like, can I go in real quick? Well, no, you're not. I'm like, just for a second, I want to say hello to some. And they're like, why are you back here?
Right.
And so, because you get an attachment dependent on them.
Well, I think for all of us who treat cancer, it's really nice to know that impression is made, that you feel
Yes.
cared for.
Yes.
And I appreciate that you put all those voices and faces in your book as well. I think that's really special.
Yeah, it was labor of love.
Awesome. Can you tell us where folks can find your book?
Mainly on Amazon, and it's on in paperback and also Kindle books if you want an ebook version, and also Apple Books has it, and Barnes & Noble. And right now I think it's out of stock at Barnes & Noble, but usually you can get it there, most places like that. But the easiest probably is Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming in today,
My
Glen.
pleasure. Awesome meeting you. Thank you.
I think Glen's perspective on cancer and life in general is a fantastic way to close out season 2. And I'd like to invite you all who haven't heard season 1 to go back and take a listen. That season is perfect to suggest to friends who've been recently diagnosed with cancer because it walks you through all of the phases of the journey from symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, and survivorship. Thanks so much for listening to The Cancering Show. We're really excited to get started working on season 3, and we've already got great ideas. We want your ideas too. Send us a message on Facebook at Mitchell Cancer, or message me personally at jyoungpierce on Twitter, and let me know your thoughts about what you'd like to hear on the show. Thank you again for listening.
Thanks everyone for listening to The Cancering Show with JYP, Dr. Jennifer Young-Pierce. Please subscribe, rate, and review this show on iTunes and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Want us to deliver The Cancering Show to your email inbox? Contact us at cancering.com and we can make sure you never miss an episode. We would love to know what you think about the show, or if you have any suggestions on topics you would like to hear. You can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and cancering.com. Till next time, be healthy, happy, and always thriving.
This show is brought to you by the University of South Alabama Mitchell Cancer Institute. MCI is a cutting-edge cancer research and patient center built to fight cancer smarter in Mobile and Baldwin County, Alabama. Our researchers and clinicians focus daily on the struggle against cancer, serving a potential catchment population of more than 4.1 million people, with a singular focus of advancing cancer diagnosis, treatment, and prevention throughout the Gulf Coast and beyond, with science, technology, and hope. Want to know more about the Mitchell Cancer Institute? Visit us at usamci.com or search for us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Mitchell Cancer Institute is a member of USA Health. To learn more about all of our hospitals, clinics, and services, visit usahealthsystem.com.